So in this video, I want to break down a painful lesson me and my business partner learned the hard way, which cost us thousands of dollars, months on end of hard work, and meant essentially that the first ever book we published basically went to crap. And this lesson will relate back to you on your podcasting journey right now. This video really is specifically, this entire channel really is specifically for entrepreneurs and experts with podcasts who've been doing it for a couple of years now, but are still struggling to grow, to build momentum, to gain traction despite providing valuable content. And I want to share this lesson that we had to learn the hard way so that it saves you a bunch of time, a bunch of effort, a bunch of energy moving forward with your show. And hopefully it helps you gain clarity around why your podcast isn't gaining traction as fast as you would like, despite you podcasting for years, interviewing probably some incredible guests and having amazing conversations on your show. So the lesson here really is as simple as most podcasters struggle to grow because their podcast is too broad. And if you're listening or watching this right now, you've probably heard something along the lines of, you need to niche down, you have to find an audience you want to serve. And that principle of understanding your target avatar, your target audience, the person you're trying to reach with either your product, your service, and in this case with your actual podcast, that principle stands true across marketing in general, but also stands very true when it comes to growing a podcast. You need to pick a niche if you want to build an audience around your show. Now, like I mentioned at the start, me and my business partner learned this the hard way. Honestly, very early on in our business, business journey, business venture, business, I don't know. Early on in the business, we learned this the hard way. And I'm very grateful about this lesson. So it was like maybe 5 years ago, at this point, I dropped out of university to go all in on the podcasting space. And at that point, me and my business partner, Tygo O'Shea, my best friend, we decided to build a publishing business all about podcasting, how to start a podcast, how to grow a podcast, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, the first book that we decided to publish was a book titled Every Podcaster's Biggest Hurdles. Because at that time, we were doing a lot of market research, trying to learn more and just gain a basic understandings of what podcasters are going through, their struggles. And the whole idea was we're going to create a book, again, covering every podcaster's biggest hurdles, because we're seeing people talk about how they struggle with anxiety about starting a podcast. We saw people talking about, the mindset of feeling like an imposter when they are podcasting. They talked about having, paralysis by analysis of what direction to go in. And they had all of these different problems. So we thought, why don't we create a book that captures everyone's mental hurdles, all their mental problems, and publish it? And to be honest with you, I thought it was going to be an amazing idea. So we spend 6 to 9 months working hard, creating our book, investing in writers, us writing parts of the books ourselves, getting a cover art designed, everything put together. And then the day of the launch comes and we look at our dashboard to see how much money have we made, how many books have we sold. And to our surprise, we had sold basically zero. And we thought to ourselves, no way, maybe it's just a fluke. Let's refresh the page. So we refreshed the page and looked at the dashboard, and once again, it said 0 sales. Then a week goes by and we look at our dashboard and we've made like 3 sales. A month goes by and on that particular book, we've made like 10 sales during that month, which was odd. But thankfully, at the same time of publishing our first book, we also published a second book basically around the same time. Like we basically published them both at the same time. It was part of a marketing strategy back then, published 2 books. Anyways, I'm not going to get into details. The point is we had a separate book which did extremely well, which was selling hundreds of copies, then thousands of copies, and has gone on to sell over 40,000 copies, probably at this point, probably well over 40,000 copies. And that was another book that we published called Podcasting Made Simple. The premise was very simple. A simple step-by-step guide to launching your very first podcast. And it was that. It was as simple as that. It was very clear. It was very specific. There was no grandioseness to it. It was just very clear. We were helping people launch their very first podcast. And that book did exceptionally well. And upon reflection, with both of us kind of analyzing, hey, how come we thought this book, Every Podcaster's Biggest Hurdles, was going to do super well? Because we thought it was going to cover everyone in the podcasting space. Everyone's talking about all their hurdles. But then we have the second book that was very simple, very plain, wasn't anything original, that just blew up. And the reason why that happened was because on one hand, you have a book that's trying to cover so many different things, mental hurdles, paralysis by analysis, anxiety around podcasting, imposter syndrome, all of these problems, overwhelm, overthinking, all of these problems that it almost diluted the potency of the book. Someone might have had a problem with, let's say, paralysis by analysis. Someone might have had a problem when it comes to feeling like an imposter, but they wouldn't have seen the book and felt like the entire book was made for them. They would have thought, I would love to read that chapter on imposter syndrome, but I don't really care about paralysis by analysis. I don't really feel overwhelmed. Therefore, why would they buy the book just for this one chapter? So they don't. Whereas Podcasting Made Simple, it was very simple, it was very clear, it was very direct, it was very niche. We weren't trying to do everything, we just tried to do one thing very well, which is how to launch a podcast step by step from scratch. And that went on to become a best-selling book, selling thousands of copies, and gave me and Ty, my business partner, the credibility to be able to speak to so many more podcasters. That really was the book that allowed us to make a stamp in the podcasting space. Like till now, the brand under the name Daniel Larson, we used Daniel Larson because we were super embarrassed, ashamed, and we had no idea kind of what direction we were going to go in when it comes to the publishing business. So we thought, why not just use a pen name? But again, that's a story for a different day. The point is that brand still today has, those books accumulatively have like nearly 1,000 reviews. So people enjoying the book, loving the book, and finding it super valuable. And it's because we weren't broad, we became niche. Now, what does this have to do with your podcast and how does this relate? So many podcasters out there right now providing incredible value, but are still stuck with slow growth. Maybe you're in a spot where your show really isn't growing no matter how hard you try. Maybe promoting on social media, maybe you're having incredible interviews with guests, but your numbers don't really reflect how good the interviews are. Maybe you've tried a bunch of different things, but things don't seem to be working. And after interviewing and coaching 400 plus podcasts, the number one thing and the first step that we help our clients with is getting clear on the exact person you're trying to reach with your show. Going from a broad podcast to a specific show, helping one specific type of person. Now, what this might look like for a podcast might be, let's say you have a podcast all about fitness and you're into fitness and you love fitness, so you start a podcast about fitness and your interests dictate what topics you cover on the show. So maybe you talk about veganism, maybe you then talk about bodybuilding, then you talk about eating healthy, then you talk about getting better sleep. Again, you really enjoy these topics, health and fitness, so you cover a wide range of topics around health and fitness because one, you enjoy it, and two, if you cover a wide range of topics, then it means that the people you can target with the show is big. You have a big pool of people who might be interested in what you have to cover. That's the thesis anyway. And it sounds good in theory, but practically speaking, it doesn't actually work out like that. Because you're essentially saying, hey, I love all of these different topics. I'm going to create this show based on my own interests. And I'm just going to pray to God that everyone else is going to love my show. But again, that's not really how you reach an audience because you don't really know who you're trying to reach. You're just covering a bunch of different topics that you're interested in. Whereas the other side of this is you decide, you know what specific person am I trying to reach? What listener do I want to reach with my show? And you decide, I'm a vegan and I love talking about veganism and I want to reach more vegans who are maybe just beginning because I used to really struggle to understand the pros and cons, how to keep healthy as a vegan, what's true and what's false. And I want to help other people out there who are going through that transition from being, I don't know what you'd call them, being like not a lay person, but like not being a vegan to becoming a vegan. And I want my podcast to help that specific group of people. Now, when you go from this mindset of, hey, this is all about me and my interest, and you flip it to, hey, this podcast really, is about me and it's about what I'm going through, but really my podcast is here to serve the audience I'm trying to reach. And in order to serve that audience, I need to make sure that I'm very clear on what this podcast is about. So you make the podcast vegan for beginners. Everything you need to know about your transition from being a non-vegan to being a vegan. And then every single topic you cover is all about what? Veganism. Now, this might all sound great, but how does that affect the growth of your show? How can you go from a general health based podcast that's all about health and fitness, weight loss, bodybuilding, sleep, all these things, how does going from that to then going from a podcast that's specifically about becoming a vegan, how can that possibly help you grow your show? Because you've gone from a very broad target audience to now a specific target audience. So surely it means that less people would like to listen to your show. But that's actually not the case. It ends up being that when you're marketing your podcast and it's very specific about veganism, instead of just general health and fitness, when you promote your podcast online, what do you think happens to people's attention to your show? Are they going to pay more attention or less attention? If they are a vegan, that is, right? Versus if you've got a broad podcast all about health and fitness, but doesn't really cover a specific topic, why should someone listen to your show versus someone else's podcast? So that's the first thing. Marketing your podcast is infinitely easier when you know the specific person you're trying to reach with your podcast. If you know you're trying to reach vegans with your podcast, you simply just literally talk to vegans when you're promoting your show. But if it's generally about health and fitness, you're just promoting for promoting's sake, but you're not trying to reach a particular person. That's the first thing. The second thing is, which is really important, is for you to grow your show, you need to have a way to keep new listeners coming back for more, binging your content. This is really important. If you're trying to grow your show, you need a way to keep new listeners coming back for more, binging your content. And if you have a very broad show that covers a wide variety of different topics, I'm sorry to break the news, but it's going to be very tricky for you to keep people coming back for more because let's paint a picture. Let's say, for example, there was a podcast about veganism and you're a vegan and you saw them promote an episode and you thought, you know what, I like that guest. Let me listen to what they have to say. You click on it, you listen, you love it. Then you go to the next episode and the next episode is about bodybuilding. And you're like, what the hell? I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm a vegan. I'm a new vegan who's trying to figure out this stuff about veganism. I don't care about bodybuilding. But then again, you check the next episode and the next episode's all about meditation. And you're like, what the hell is going on? Then the next one is about how to eat healthy diets in order to build more muscle mass. And you're like, what the hell? So you decide to leave the podcast, never return, because you didn't feel like the entire podcast was made for you. There was just one episode that was made for you. That's what's happening to your podcast right now when you cover a wide range of topics. You might attract individuals who enjoy that particular topic, but when you cover a wide range of topics and they don't feel like every single episode is relevant to them, they won't come back for more. Versus that same listener discovers a podcast about veganism, they look at the back catalogue and it's all about veganism. That person is going to stick around as long as the content is good. In most cases, the content will be good, so they're going to stick around long term. Because the entire product, the entire podcast is clear, it's niched down, it's specific, and it feels like the entire show was made for them. It doesn't feel like just this one piece was made for them. Now, the parallel here is for me and Tig in our book, Every Podcast's Biggest Hurdles, that had the exact same issue. And we were scratching our heads for ages thinking, why wasn't this working? Why wasn't this working? We thought it was going to work. I'm covering all these different topics. But we failed to understand that, again, people, if they're going to buy a book, if they're going to invest in your podcast, they can't just have one episode that feels relevant to them. They can't just have one chapter that's relevant to them. The entire thing needs to feel like it was specifically made for them. And that's why our book, Podcast Made Simple, did exceptionally well, because it was clear, it was specific, it was niched down, and it solved one specific problem, helping people who didn't know how to launch a podcast, launch a podcast. And for you, with your podcast, start thinking about how can I niche down my show to become way more specific. This is something that we help our clients with in the Get More Listens Academy, our personalized one-on-one podcast growth and monetization program. We have this as a starting point, gaining that clarity on who you're trying to reach, because if not, everything else falls apart. Everything else falls apart. It's going to be impossible to grow the show when you're not extremely clear on the exact listener you're trying to reach, why they'll listen to your show, what's going to keep them coming back for more. That's the starting point. So if you have got a broad show and if you are struggling with your podcast, take a look and ask yourself the question of how can I become way more specific with my show in order to make my marketing efforts more effective, in order to build a consistent fan base who are raving about my show because every single episode is relevant, And the obvious thing is, if you're trying to monetize your podcast as well, and you have a program, a service, something, you need people to build a like, know, and trust with you. And you also need them to feel like they trust you as an expert on a particular topic. Now, if that topic is broad, generic, what's the likelihood they're going to want to become a client and a customer of yours? Very slim. So like I mentioned, we made a very painful and expensive mistake that cost us thousands, a bunch of headaches, and so much time spent on a book that failed, but taught us a very valuable lesson about creating a product, in this case, a podcast, or in my case, a book that is very clear, very specific, and it targets one particular person. So that being said, if you enjoy this, be sure to leave a like and a comment down below. If you have any questions, I create these videos in order to, one, attract entrepreneurs and experts who've been doing this for a couple of years and are struggling to grow and are just looking for clarity around why they're in the spot they're in, and are looking for very simple steps they can take to fast track their growth. So with that being said, I'll catch you in the next video.